In 1977, in a galaxy far, far away, box office history was made as Star Wars blasted onto the big screen and the greatest of movie franchises was born.
It's pure entertainment. It's like a roller coaster ride.
Around the globe, filmmakers took a stab at fantasy horror films, with Italy's Suspiria and Japan's Hausu becoming cult classics. While a new midnight classic was born with David Lynch's debut Eraserhead, north of the border, David Cronenberg continued to shock with hypersexualized body horror with his film Rabid.
One thing the films of 1977 have in common is that they still don't quite have that corporatization yet. Whether we're talking about a big blockbuster like Star Wars or one of the cult films, they tend to come from a very specific and idiosyncratic vision.
What is there to say about Star Wars? It's both the best and worst thing to ever happen to movies. It ushered in and solidified this sort of obsession with box office gross and the blockbuster as we know it today. And that those are maybe bad things from some circles. It maybe killed New Hollywood and the sort of auteur system. But at the same time, I mean, it's also just a great movie.
George made a movie that he wanted to see, not a movie that he thought the public would want to see, because if he thought that if he'd made a movie like that, we would be seeing a disaster film again or something like that, probably.
I can't imagine what it's like to go in fresh without really knowing what the film is about, without knowing what these characters are, without knowing the mythology of Star Wars. It feels like today we're just born with it in our DNA. But for those audiences in '77, this was a revolution.
What George Lucas envisioned for that film stayed pretty much what he imagined. He was very, very specific about the things that he wanted, and some of the things that he required for the film, they needed to invent completely new technologies in order to do. So George Lucas hired a bunch of people that weren't even special effects people to achieve some of this stuff. Like he hired machinists, he hired photographers, he hired animators, and he put them all in a room with a bunch of money and said, make space happen. And they did.
There's an intelligence to Star Wars that often goes unnoticed because it's kind of, you know, like the fantasy elements, like kind of the visual craft just kind of drowns out just the storytelling of it, which is actually pretty incredible and layered. You got this kind of meticulous world building that is considerate of politics, it's considerate of what's a republic and a rebellion and all of these things.
Every few seconds, the camera finds the most fascinating face you've ever seen in your life and tells you nothing about what that character is, what they're doing. It implies a story that you are just sort of waving through the middle of. And that's from the beginning when you see this ship going by, this tiny little freighter trying to escape this huge leviathan of a ship, and it's battle scarred, and these people are talking about like this political situation you have no way to coordinate the meaning of, referring to an emperor who we do not see at all in the movie, right? It became the fascination of the next decade to know everything, to know who that person, that walrus-looking guy was, and who that weird slug thing is.
Obviously, it was an international success, but because no one expected that, they let George Lucas have the toy rights. And this is sort of an infamous story in Hollywood because Hollywood really learned its lesson from this because the toys became one of the biggest parts of Star Wars. And now you see blockbusters making films to make toys and spin-offs and TV shows, and that started with Star Wars. From that point on, it became the blueprint for how Hollywood tries to make money.
While Spielberg had a huge hit with Jaws, I really think Close Encounters of the Third Kind is the first film that you can consider Spielbergian. It is very much about that sense of wonder. You see the kind of shots that he loved to repeat. You see these obsessive characters, this kind of beauty and optimism that is such a big part of his filmmaking.
Even if the aliens are a bit mysterious, they want to reach out, they want to communicate, you know? I mean, how many great American movies are there about communication? This is a movie about not shooting first and asking questions later.
What's interesting about the film is in UFO movies and alien movies, it tends to be about alien invaders coming to conquer the planet. Close Encounters was a film that said, you don't have to be afraid. You know, there's something out there for you to explore, and it presented aliens as something to look at in awe and someone ushering in a new level of humanity. And that was just a big change for the sci-fi genre.
You're never afraid, you're just intrigued. So all those little moments of, you know, the little aliens come zooming by him in the car, or the bright lights that you see. Just the masterful control that he has over how the excitement is leading you toward that Devil's Tower moment. And of course, the iconic thing is, you know, the mashed potatoes at the dinner table where he just can't stop and his whole family looks at him very sadly. And then next thing you know, the whole living room is the Devil's Tower, but you don't know what it is. So by the time they actually see the train accident, Devil's Tower on the news, you're just completely there with them. And you feel your whole body leaning forward, you know, like you also have to get there too and see what's going on there. And I just love that about that movie.
In 1977, what a breakthrough in special effects. This is when special effects are truly capable of being immersive and real and convincing.
A great thing Spielberg notes is that when he was making the movie, he actually received a 20-page document from NASA asking him not to make the movie. And he felt that by them thinking this movie was dangerous, he knew he was doing something right.
In 1977, Eraserhead debuted to an audience of 25 people. But what happened throughout that year was word of mouth, and notable cinemas booking it at midnight, to the point where you had sold-out audiences coming back again and again to see this unique film.
This is Chucko, and this is Buster, and this is Pete. I'm David Lynch, and this is Bob, and this is Dan. And we just wanted to get together and thank all of the people that have supported Eraserhead through the years, and particularly thank the New Art Theater for its support. The New Art was one of the first theaters to ever show Eraserhead.
It bubbled its way up into the mainstream and into the zeitgeist. There's something honest about his work. And even though there's something bizarre about Eraserhead, there's a truth in it.
What's great about Eraserhead is that Lynch leaves it up to the viewer to interpret what's happening. He won't give you any clues. It's really creepy, it's dark, and it's industrial. So you have to figure out why this world exists and what Henry's doing in this world.
Eraserhead has one of the most notorious and uncomfortable family dinner sequences I've ever seen on film. It's when Henry is meeting his girlfriend's family for the first time, and even the chicken on the table cannot stand to get away from there as it sort of dances away. This is a scene that will end with the mother accusing Henry and his daughter of having sex, and then all of a sudden there's a baby. There is almost no act of procreation. It's just willed from someone's nightmare.
There's a baby. It's at the hospital.
Mom!
And you're the father.
That's impossible. It's only
Mother, they're still not sure it is a baby.
The reason why his movies work for us, no matter how weird they get, is because he understands the classical Hollywood film form. And that collision of classical form with avant-garde, abstract, things coming together creates the world of David Lynch cinema. This is why we love Mulholland Drive. This is why we love Blue Velvet. And this is why the world accepted and embraced Eraserhead.
Robert Altman's Three Women is a wonderful showcase for Shelley Duvall, not only because she has a wonderful main role in it, but also because Altman gave so much control to her. She wrote all the diary entries, she chose all her own outfits, she decorated the apartment, she even chose the menu for the party that she has. It was very much a strong collaboration.
Hi, Millie.
Hi. It is Pinky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go get you a suit that fits.
Okay.
You can understand why a character like Pinky, played by Sissy Spacek, is fascinated by this woman.
You're the most perfect person I ever met.
So much so that she literally starts becoming her over the course of the film. She becomes very flamboyant, she becomes very personable, she becomes very charming in a way that she wasn't before. And because of this, we also see Shelley Duvall transform a little bit too, and she becomes the meek one.
Hello?
Are you okay?
Who's this?
It's me, Millie.
Oh.
The film is described as very Freudian a lot of the time, very indebted to psychoanalysis and these questions of personality and identity and selfhood. But I think the big thing for me with Three Women is just how obscure and impenetrable it can seem. And then while you're watching it, it's also so beautiful and inviting and intoxicating.
Sometimes, you know, you meet a woman that just captivates you and you just want to be her. And I think that this movie does a really good job at depicting that experience of meeting somebody that sort of changes the way that you see the world and the way that you see yourself and the way that you want to present yourself.
Dario Argento's Suspiria is such an incredible horror film. It's full of spectacle, color, and style. It's a true horror classic.
Out of every horror movie I've ever seen, I'd say Suspiria comes the closest to capturing the feeling of a nightmare. From the minute the film starts with that goblin score, to seeing the woman like running out of the school in the rain, there's just this impending feeling of dread. It's like nothing quite makes sense, everything feels off.
It is a slasher movie where you're like, why does this movie need to look as beautiful as it looks? And I think that that's partly the point of the seduction of it. Argento is thinking about the way the film is itself an art that is seducing you. These characters are all artists, they're all ballerinas. They are a coven of witches, but they're also in the business of making beautiful things. It's thinking about the way that beauty will seduce you to your death, which I find really amazing and compelling. It's also one of the most beautiful spaces in cinema, this mansion that they're living in, but it's like completely ludicrous. Like, you would lose your mind in it. You turn corners and it's like, why do you even have a barbed wire room? What is this for?
The movie was originally written to have a bunch of 12-year-old girls in it, and Dario Argento's father, who also happened to be the studio head, took one look at the script and said, yeah, no, that's not happening. We're not having 12-year-olds in this. It is too violent, it is too graphic. So they, of course, ended up casting a bunch of 20-somethings, but they didn't change the script, which is why these young girls have this sort of infantile, innocent, childish way of speaking.
I once read that names which begin with the letter S are the names of snakes.
They also made choices like they raised up all the doorknobs so the women are kind of sized like children. This is just not addressed in the film, but it gives this odd and uncanny feeling throughout.
I grew up in the 90s, so I loved Nightmare on Elm Street. I loved Friday the 13th, the cornier side of horror. But when I found this film through my friends, it was really about the incredible use of lighting. It was about the beautiful costumes. It was about the dancing. It was about the music. And that's really what Suspiria did. It gave filmmakers permission to make horror and to make something that they were really proud of.
It would be really easy to look at a film like Hausu, or as it's widely known, House, and say it's a silly, stylistic horror film. It's not silly. It's an incredible political allegory, and you can miss that on the first viewing quite easily.
On its surface, it's a very simple narrative of a group of girls going to visit one of their aunties for a summer break. Underneath the surface, there are a lot of really deep themes, including, anxieties surrounding the bombing of Hiroshima and, a generation's feeling of loss and how that loss didn't seem to be felt by the next generation. The film's director, Nobuhiko Obayashi, was actually commissioned to write a script akin to Jaws.
Obayashi decided that, okay, he was gonna be up to the challenge, and his idea was to go to his 11-year-old daughter and ask her for movie ideas. And this movie is literally a product of an 11-year-old telling her father what scares her. And she would say things like, creepy reflections scare me, the idea that my bed might eat me or piano keys might bite me, that scares me. These kind of like incomprehensible ideas that could only come from the mind of a child. And Obayashi ran with all of them. It was a massive hit with youth audiences, and I think it's because the movie taps into a dream logic that kids were identifying with, and they were like, yeah, this feels like my nightmares.
Bandit.
One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when Melody, who is the musical one, is playing the piano, but the piano slowly starts to possess her and also eat her. The film is also haunted by this sinister cat that is in almost every scene and keeps shooting laser beams at characters to affect its magical powers. It's so good.
The thing about House that I find so inspiring is that it reminds you that movies can be anything. It proves that continuity, verisimilitude, all these things you learn in film school that a film has to adhere to, they're not actually important. What's important is personality of vision. And House has that in spades.
Rabid was David Cronenberg's second film. It was his follow-up to 1975's Shivers. With Rabid, you really see Cronenberg bring sexiness. There's sexiness in Shivers, but this is a film that employs one of the most famous porn stars of all time, Marilyn Chambers.
I think a lot of people consider the casting of Marilyn Chambers in Rabid as David Cronenberg kind of striking against the Canadians that hated him and called him a pornographer. But in fact, it was actually a choice by producer Ivan Reitman. He really thought that Marilyn Chambers would sell the movie, and Cronenberg was not great on it, but he ended up deciding that Marilyn was a wonderful actress, and he really thought she did a great job in the part.
She wanted to try a straight narrative film and was willing to do it cheaply so that she could establish herself that way. And we were happy to have her because it meant she was a name that we can afford, and it's really as simple as that.
David Cronenberg casting Marilyn Chambers in Rabid just says everything that he wants to about the nature of the virus and the horrors that kind of frighten him. That it's not just, being frightened of the sexually transmitted disease, but also there being an attraction there. And casting Marilyn Chambers does a lot of that work right from the get-go.
Cronenberg is always a filmmaker who works from a place of order that then falls into chaos. And then what's provocative about him is he suggests that that chaos in some ways is more natural and more human, and that, these irrepressible desires are kind of what we're all working towards anyway. That holding them back is futile.
We'll go to the police.
No.
We'll go to the hospital.
Oh, it won't work. Just leave me alone! No!
The work is not derivative, it's quite original. And it's the originality, I think, that disturbs people in a movie like Rabid.
Chantal Akerman's News from Home is a really powerful film, and it's one that demands that you sit with it. I think the film is such an incredible exploration of trying to figure out where you belong while trying to shed what you belonged to without really letting it go.
In News from Home, Akerman reads out the letters that her mother sent her while she was studying in New York between 1971 and 1973. This is a period in Akerman's life where she had never been away from her family prior. She's alienated, she's lonely, she's living in a city that is very different than her native Belgium.
Ma très chère petite fille, j'ai bien reçu ta lettre et j'espère que tu continueras à m'écrire souvent. De toute façon, j'espère que tu me reviendras vite. J'espère que tu continues à bien te porter et que tu travailles déjà.
We are getting a letter from her mom, getting an update on the family. We never actually hear Akerman's side of events. It's only through her mother we get the sense that she's found a new job. She may or may not be hurting for money. We never quite know what she is doing in New York. So it creates this weird sense of separation. She's physically separated from her mother via distance, but we're also separated from the filmmaker as we're watching this film.
Chantal Akerman's News from Home is one of the most hypnotic film experiences I've ever had. When I first went to New York City, I got off the bus at about 5 a.m. and I was just kind of dumped into Chinatown. And the way that the city looked, the way the city moved, it just was such a unique experience that I've never really seen captured on film in that way.
The way how the camera is always planted, it forces us to start to fill in the gaps. So, for example, you will see characters on a subway platform. At first, you wonder if something's going to happen, and nothing actually happens. And then your mind starts to question, well, what's going on in these people's lives? It's a really fascinating work. It's a challenging work, but I think it's also rewarding in its own way. It's a film that you think a lot about afterwards.
Agnes Varda is one of the most iconic female filmmakers of all time. A lot of her films are focused on women and tell us the true stories of women, and depicting it without judgment in a way that feels so revolutionary even to this day.
One Sings, the Other Doesn't is inarguably the best musical made about abortion. This is a time period in France where abortion is still illegal. It would have been a very political act to make this film about family planning and the effects that it has on women's lives. Pauline comes from a family that are going to send her to college. She really has a lot going for her, whereas Suzanne is a young mother, a mother who has too many children and is pregnant again with one that she cannot feed.
The two sort of took different paths in life, but one of the things that brought them back together was they both followed a news story of a teenage girl who's being prosecuted for seeking an abortion. What Varda's really done is tell us that what happened to them 10 years prior was so significant that that is why they're following this case. That's why they feel passionately about abortion rights. And I think it's just a wonderful character detail and a wonderful setup for the next hour plus of narrative.
C'est simple, à chaque fois qu'il m'arrivait quelque chose moche ou chouette, j'avais envie de te voir.
Moi aussi. Je me faisais même des phrases dans ma tête pour te raconter.
On se quitte plus cette fois.
We need women to tell women's stories to show the impact that these things can have on women in a good way. Because I think that the point of this film is that if she didn't get an abortion, her life would be different. And she gets an abortion and she's able to live her life. You know, she struggles and she has to transition out of what is a very difficult period of grief, but she finds her own way. And if she had another child, I don't know if she would have been able to do that in the same way. And this movie isn't afraid to say that. But also this movie is really optimistic. It does depict these events that are tragic and hard and full of grief, but at the end of the day, you feel optimistic when you leave the film.
A big part of the movie is how women form communities with each other, whether it's working together at a factory or being part of a musical troupe that travels around. It's all about the lives and the families that they form that are non-traditional families, but by the end of the movie, it's very clear that they're just as important.
Having watched Slapshot for the first time this year, I was so impressed by this movie and kind of shocked at how good it is and how down-to-earth it is. And Paul Newman's fashion in this film, truly, truly unreal. Like the turtlenecks, the furry coats, the medallions, like it's really giving you 70s.
What's amazing about Slapshot is you come for the hockey. It's beautifully shot hockey. It's fast. You're watching games. People are smacking each other. And it is old school hockey, where they are not playing with helmets. These people have serious head injuries, and that definitely translates into their personalities.
Okay, guys, show us what you got. Let's go, guys!
Slapshot is also really the rare American Hollywood movie that portrays French Canadians. It has a lot of fun with its French Canadian characters, and actually, while it was not immediately a massive success in the United States, it was huge in Quebec.
Slashing is, like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. And, there's a penalty for that?
Yeah. And for a trip also, you know, like that, and for hook like this, and for spear, you know, like that.
Nancy Dowd was an Academy Award-winning screenwriter known for Coming Home, starring Jane Fonda, but she also comes from this blue-collar background and understood a way of speaking about people, and especially people in like Rust Belt America, that I think a lot of Hollywood elites at the time really didn't understand.
Nancy Dowd based a lot of Slapshot on her brother Ned Dowd, who was a hockey player, and she just loved his stories of being on the road, of getting beat up. So she started getting him to write down a diary, a journal, so she could work off of it. She got him to surreptitiously record in locker rooms so she could hear what that kind of world of men was like.
We need this win, you know, we got a lot of losses to...
Yeah, we got a lot of losses!
Let's start making it for a start winning. Go to the top, at the bottom. That's what we're
for, guys, to win.
I think Slapshot can be a little tough for modern audiences just because of the amount of slurs, the kind of language that isn't used as much anymore, this locker room language. But it's also a movie that's fairly progressive. There are very interesting women characters, there are queer characters, and also Paul Newman is mostly using these slurs to kind of pick at fragile masculinity. He sees how weak these men are, and he's just kind of going after them. So I do think that there is a progressive bent to this film.
You are kind of offended, but I think it's true to that era and true to the hockey world. I'm a sister of a hockey guy, so I know what it's like, and I know that it's inappropriate. I know that guys are puffing themselves up to try to seem cool, but at the end of the day, they're just people.
Yes, it's a movie about hockey. It's a movie about violence and camaraderie and friendship, but it's also a movie about loss. It's a movie about devastation, what upholds a community, what connects people in small towns, and really what kind of future those towns have. And it really is one of those sports movies that, you know, I think will stand the test of time.
Of course, the box office in 1977 was dominated by Star Wars, but not that far off. At the number 2 position was Smokey and the Bandit.
You've got gigantic 70s cars smashing into each other, a basset hound named Fred, a rig full of beer, and a black Trans Am. What else do you need?
Smokey and the Bandit, you know, it is just astonishing to me that there was a time in American pop culture where the CB radio was the hottest thing going.
Hey, Bandit, me and Fred's got a question. What do you and Fred want? How come we doing this? Well, why not? Well, they said it couldn't be done. Well, that's the reason, son. That's good with Fred. We're clear.
And 4? Is this network of CB radio rig drivers. It's a community. They're looking out for each other, and they're trying to keep Smokey out of their way.
Smokey and the Bandit is the first film of director Hal Needham. He had the screenplay and he showed it to his good friend Bert, and Bert let him know that it's the worst screenplay he had ever read, but he'll make it anyway.
Hal was a stuntman who wished he could have been a leading actor, and Bert really wanted to be a stuntman. So Smokey and the Bandit really allowed Hal to be a star director and Bert to do these crazy stunts.
Even if Smokey and the Bandit doesn't really work today, you have to be impressed by its stunts and by its driving. This is a film that really features a Pontiac Trans Am at its greatest. It would start a Trans Am craze, and it would lead Pontiac to give Burt Reynolds a new Trans Am every year.
You be careful, you hear?
One of the reasons why Smokey and the Bandit works so well is really the chemistry between Burt Reynolds and Sally Field. And of course, that chemistry was real. They ended up really having a relationship. Burt really wanted her to be in the movie. He thought that the flying nun being in this movie would be hilarious. And he, in his late life, said that she was the love of his life. And I think you really see that on screen.
Reynolds was one of those movie stars who never seemed impressed to be in a movie. And there have been very few American movie stars who have had that kind of effortless, kind of condescending but likable smarm that Reynolds had. He was not an everyman. You know, the point of Burt Reynolds is not that he was an everyman. The point is that he's Burt Reynolds, and every man just has to kind of accept that they're not. And that's the fun of Smokey and the Bandit.
Sorcerer is pure director ego at its most powerful. William Friedkin, coming off of The Exorcist, is basically given a carte blanche. So what he does is to make it the biggest possible movie he can.
Some biographers of Friedkin have really painted him as very competitive with other directors. And while Francis Ford Coppola is in the jungles of the Philippines filming Apocalypse Now, Friedkin apparently said he wanted to do his own jungle film and retreated to South America.
He went and made a film that was probably, on paper, a really bad decision, but something he was deeply passionate about, and he went into the jungle and just shot this white-knuckle thrill ride that will just, like, leave your heart racing for 2 hours.
Sorcerer is known as one of the key disaster productions in film history. Over 50% of the crew would get dismissed at some point or another due to illness, injury, or mental health. This was a grueling film for everyone involved, including Friedkin, who just a few weeks prior to the film's premiere was diagnosed with malaria, having lost over 50 pounds.
The crux of this movie is you have these four men who essentially take on this brutal task of having to transport very fragile nitroglycerin across this dense jungle. Every little bump in the road, you wonder, well, is this gonna be when one of the trucks explodes?
Basically, these people are all damned by what they've done before the film even starts. It's this incredible meditation on doom and tension, and I mean, it's nihilistic as hell, but all of William Friedkin's movies are nihilistic as hell.
He was completely uninterested with, that sort of conventional plotting of, this is a good person, you like them. This is a bad person, you don't like them. And he thinks that those lines should overlap and you should be able to make up your own minds. So he really doubled down on that in this film, and he made a movie where there isn't a single character with a single redeeming quality. What he didn't anticipate is that a little-known movie called Star Wars opened a week before this, and it turned out that people did want to root for heroes. They did like good people versus bad people. And when Sorcerer came out, nobody knew how to make heads or tails of it. I think it also didn't help that the title confused people into thinking it was a movie about wizards.
It's not the film that you go in expecting you're gonna get. It's actually something better, something thrilling. It's one of those films that is taking many years for critics, cinephiles to revisit and actually appreciate.
Talking about Annie Hall breaks my heart because it's very hard to talk about a Woody Allen movie now without acknowledging everything that's gone on in the past and the present that we know about, that I did not know about in 1977. And I just loved this movie when it came out. I loved their chemistry. I loved their way with each other. I loved the kinds of things they talked about.
For a full 10 years after Annie Hall comes out, every single rom-com is compared to Annie Hall. That's how important this film was to the genre. It remains one of the very few comedies to ever win the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Love or hate Woody Allen, and you have good reasons to do both. What Woody Allen did so effectively is look at the little moments between all of the big ones, the really messy moments where things are going poorly, where things are going wrong, and how that endears us to each other. All the ways he uses dream sequences and different filmmaking techniques like subtitles to communicate what you're thinking, or split screens to communicate the duality of what two people might be feeling in a relationship. And it's also just really funny. Watching the dream sequences, watching him talk to Marshall McLuhan about film theory is funny.
So I think that my insights into Mr. McLuhan, well, have a great deal of validity.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because I happen to have Mr. McLuhan right here. So yeah, just let me come over here a second.
Oh,
Tell him.
I heard what you were saying. You know nothing of my work. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong. How you ever got to teach a course in anything is totally amazing.
One of the things that I think is so endearing about Annie Hall is her character arc. When we start off in the film, she is a little insecure. She doesn't really know her way around the world. She's just kind of trying to find herself. And by the end of the film, she's really self-assertive. She's someone who's going after what she wants in life, which is to become a singer. And she's also looking out for her own pleasure. And I think there's a lot of women who identified with that arc, who identified with trying to find yourself in the world, just like Annie Hall does in the film.
We've all had to kind of do this calculation, knowing what we know in the Me Too era, of how to look back on the things that we loved in a more sort of ignorant time. For each one of us, we have to kind of work out that calculation if we're ever going to be able to watch a movie like Annie Hall again. And then maybe you can keep that movie that helped shape you, acknowledging all of its difficulties, but it also still manages to mean something to you.